The day my brother told me Grandpa had left everything to him, I did not cry. I just stood in the middle of Grandpa's quiet living room and looked at the old brown chair where he used to sit every evening. The room still smelled like his coffee and the cedar oil he rubbed into the wooden table. His reading glasses were resting beside an unopened newspaper, as though he might return at any moment and ask why everyone looked so serious. My brother Marcus stood near the fireplace holding a thick folder against his chest. "I know this is hard, Naomi," he said softly, "but Grandpa made his decision." I looked at him and tried to understand how the man I had grown up with could meet my eyes so calmly. "What decision?" I asked. Marcus lowered his voice. "He left me the house, the land, his savings, and the family business." For a moment, the room became completely silent. Even the old wall clock seemed to stop. "My name is Naomi Carter. I am a 47-year-old Black American woman, born and raised in a small town outside Atlanta, Georgia. I worked as an elementary school secretary for nearly 20 years. I never earned much money, but I paid my bills, raised my daughter, and did my best to live honestly." Marcus was 3 years younger than me. When we were children, people often said we were different sides of the same coin. I was quiet and careful. Marcus was charming, fearless, and always searching for something bigger. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 5 new friends. Grandpa Isaiah raised us after our mother passed away. I was 13 at the time. Marcus was 10. Our father had already disappeared from our lives years earlier. Grandpa never spoke badly about him. He simply opened his home, cleared 2 bedrooms, and told us we belonged there. "You are not guests," he said on our first night. "This is your home now." Grandpa was not a wealthy man when we moved in. He owned a small furniture repair shop called Carter Woodworks. He fixed broken chairs, restored old tables, and built bookshelves for churches and schools. He worked with his hands until the skin around his fingers became rough and dark. After school, I usually sat at the front desk and completed my homework while he worked. Marcus preferred walking around town with his friends. Grandpa never forced either of us to help, but I liked being near him. The workshop felt safe. There was always soft music playing from an old radio. The air smelled like sawdust and wood stain. Grandpa would sometimes place a damaged piece of furniture in front of me and ask what I saw. "A broken chair," I once answered. He smiled and shook his head. "No, Naomi, you see what happened to it. I see what it can become." That was how Grandpa viewed people, too. He believed almost everyone could be repaired with patience, truth, and love. As the years passed, Carter Woodworks became successful. Grandpa bought the empty building next door and expanded the shop. He started restoring furniture for hotels, restaurants, and wealthy families around Atlanta. Still, he lived simply. He drove the same old truck for almost 20 years and wore shirts until the elbows became thin. Whenever someone asked why he did not buy nicer things, he would laugh. "Money should build a future," he would say. "It should not build pride." When I was 25, I married a man named Daniel. At first, he seemed gentle and responsible, but after our daughter Maya was born, things changed. Daniel became distant. He started disappearing for days and leaving bills unpaid. When Maya was 6, he left completely. I moved back into Grandpa's house with 1 suitcase, a frightened child, and less than $200 in my bank account. Grandpa never asked what I had done wrong. He simply carried Maya's bag upstairs and said, "You two are home." Marcus was living in Miami at the time. He had tried several businesses, but none had lasted. Whenever he needed money, Grandpa helped him. $500 for rent, $2,000 for a business plan. Another loan for a car Marcus said he needed for work. I never judged my brother. I knew life could be difficult. But I also noticed that Marcus only visited when he needed something. Grandpa noticed too, although he rarely complained. "Your brother is still finding his way," he would tell me. I wanted to believe that. During Grandpa's final 3 years, his health slowly became worse. His knees weakened, his memory sometimes failed, and he could no longer work long hours at the shop. I began visiting every morning before work and every evening afterward. I cooked his meals, arranged his medicine, drove him to appointments, and cleaned the house on weekends. Maya, now 22, often helped me. Marcus called sometimes. He promised to visit more often, but there was always a reason he could not come. Then, 6 months before Grandpa died, Marcus suddenly returned to Georgia. He began spending every afternoon with Grandpa. He took over the business accounts and offered to manage the shop. At first, I felt relieved. I thought my brother had finally come home to help. I did not understand then that Marcus was not returning because Grandpa needed him. He was returning because Grandpa was running out of time. And somewhere inside that quiet old house, my brother had already begun planning how to take everything. After Grandpa's funeral, the house felt emptier than I could ever describe. Every room reminded me of him. His favorite coffee mug still sat beside the kitchen sink. His old blue sweater hung behind the bedroom door. Even the porch swing seemed to wait for him every evening as the sun slipped behind the trees. For days, I stopped by after work just to water his flowers. I couldn't bear the thought of them dying too. Marcus, however, seemed busy with something else. "I'll take care of everything," he told me. "The business, the taxes, the paperwork, you don't need to worry." At first, I believed him. After all, he was my little brother. One afternoon, I walked into Grandpa's workshop and found several filing cabinets standing open. Papers were stacked across the workbench where Grandpa used to repair furniture. Marcus quickly closed one of the drawers. "You scared me," he said. "I was just looking around," I answered. He forced a smile. "I'm organizing everything before the lawyer finishes the estate." I nodded, but something about his voice felt different. It was polite, yet distant, almost as if he wanted me to leave. That evening, Maya noticed I looked troubled. "Mom," she asked gently, "is Uncle Marcus acting strange?" I hesitated. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe everyone grieves differently." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Grandpa always trusted you." Those words stayed with me all night. Grandpa had trusted me with his medicine, his appointments, his business keys, and even the spare key to his safe. He often said I knew where everything belonged. So why had he suddenly trusted Marcus with everything after he passed away? The question wouldn't leave my mind. A few days later, I returned to the house to collect some family photographs. As I walked through the hallway, I heard Marcus talking on his phone inside Grandpa's office. "He'll never know," he whispered. There was a long pause. "No, Naomi doesn't have copies." Another pause. "The lawyer only has what I gave him." I froze outside the door. My heart began beating so hard I thought he might hear it. Before I could understand what he meant, the office door opened. Marcus looked surprised to see me. "Oh, you're here. I came for some pictures." He studied my face for a second. "Did you hear anything?" I shook my head. No, it wasn't entirely a lie. I had heard enough to know something wasn't right, but not enough to accuse him. He relaxed and handed me an old photo album. "Take whatever memories you want," he said. "That's all any of us really have now." His words sounded kind. His eyes did not. That weekend, I visited Mrs. Alina Brooks, Grandpa's oldest friend. She was nearly 80 and had known him for over 40 years. When I told her about the funeral, tears filled her eyes. "He loved you dearly, Naomi." "I loved him too," she smiled sadly. "You know, about 2 months ago he came here carrying an envelope." "An envelope?" She nodded. "He said, if anything happens before I can explain everything, Naomi will understand." My heart skipped. "What was inside?" Mrs. Brooks looked confused. I never asked. He sealed it before he left. Did he leave it with you? No. He put it back in his truck before driving away. I thanked her and drove home with more questions than answers. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering Grandpa sitting at the kitchen table writing letters late into the evening. Whenever I asked who they were for, he would simply smile. Sometimes the truth needs to wait for the right day. At the time, I thought he was talking about business. Now I wasn't so sure. 3 days later, Marcus called. The lawyer scheduled the reading of Grandpa's will. My stomach tightened. When? Friday morning. Should I bring anything? No. His answer came too quickly. Just yourself. Friday finally arrived. The law office was small and quiet. The walls were covered with framed family photographs that belonged to other clients. Marcus arrived wearing an expensive navy blue suit I had never seen before. He smiled confidently as if the meeting were already over. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, greeted us with a firm handshake. Please have a seat. He placed a thick folder on the conference table. I folded my hands together and silently prayed. Not for money, not for the house, only for peace. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. We'll begin with Mr. Isaiah Carter's final will and testament. Marcus leaned back comfortably in his chair. I noticed the corner of his mouth slowly lifting into a smile. He looked like a man who already knew exactly what was about to happen. I had no idea that within the next few minutes, my entire world would collapse, and that the greatest surprise Grandpa had ever planned was still waiting to be revealed. I held my breath as Mr. Harrison opened Grandpa's file. The room was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside the window, rain tapped softly against the glass. It reminded me of all the afternoons Grandpa and I had spent together, drinking coffee while watching storms roll across the Georgia sky. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. This document was signed by Mr. Isaiah Carter 8 months before his passing and witnessed according to state law. Marcus folded his hands and looked completely relaxed. I sat with my fingers wrapped tightly around Grandpa's old handkerchief, the one I had found in his dresser the night before. The lawyer began reading. To my grandson Marcus Carter, I leave Carter Woodworks, my primary residence, the surrounding land, all business accounts, my investment portfolio, and all remaining financial assets. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. Surely there had to be more. Mr. Harrison continued reading several pages of legal language before finally looking up. To my granddaughter, Naomi Carter, my heart lifted just a little. I leave my personal Bible, my late wife's wedding ring, my collection of family photographs, and my deepest love. That was all. The room suddenly felt smaller. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't upset because of the money. I wasn't even thinking about the house. What hurt was something much deeper. Grandpa had always told me that family mattered more than possessions. I had cared for him every day during his illness. I had driven him to doctor's appointments, cooked his meals, helped him dress when arthritis made his hands too painful to button his own shirts. Had none of that mattered, Marcus slowly leaned toward me. I'm sorry, Naomi. His words sounded gentle. His smile did not. I forced myself to stand. If this is what Grandpa wanted, I whispered, then I'll respect it. Mr. Harrison nodded politely. I admire your grace. I picked up my purse and started walking toward the door. Just before I reached it, Marcus spoke again. One more thing. I turned around. I'll probably sell the house. His words struck me harder than the will itself. I stared at him. Sell it, he shrugged. It's worth a lot now. Developers have already called me. This was Grandpa's home. I know. He wanted this family to stay together. Marcus sighed impatiently. People say a lot of things before they die. For the first time in my life, I barely recognized my own brother. The little boy who used to build tree houses with me seemed completely gone. Without another word, I left the office. The rain had become heavier. I sat inside my car for almost an hour without turning on the engine. My phone rang several times. It was Maya. When I finally answered, she immediately knew something was wrong. "Mom!" I couldn't speak. She waited quietly. Finally, I whispered, "Grandpa left everything to Marcus." There was silence. "Everything?" I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Everything." When I arrived home, Maya wrapped her arms around me before I even reached the front porch. "I'm so sorry." I rested my head against her shoulder. "I just don't understand." She walked me inside and made us both a cup of tea, just like Grandpa used to do whenever life became difficult. That evening, I opened the small box the lawyer had given me. Inside was Grandma's wedding ring, Grandpa's old Bible, several faded family photographs. As I carefully turned the pages of the Bible, something unexpected slipped onto the table. It was a small white envelope. My name was written across the front in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. Naomi. My hands immediately began to shake. I looked closer. The envelope had never been opened. For a second, I considered reading it immediately. But then I noticed something written in tiny letters beneath my name. "Do not open. Give this to Attorney Harrison if my will is ever questioned." I froze. Why would Grandpa hide a letter inside the Bible, and why would he tell me not to read it? Nothing made sense anymore. The next morning, before I could decide what to do, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. His voice sounded different than before, more serious. "Ms. Carter, I need to ask you something." "Of course." "Did your grandfather ever give you, or leave you, any sealed letter or envelope?" I slowly looked down at the one lying on my kitchen table. My heartbeat became louder with every passing second. "Yes," I answered quietly. "I think he did." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then Mr. Harrison took a deep breath and said words that changed everything. "Please don't let anyone else see it. Especially your brother. Bring it directly to my office. I believe your grandfather expected this day to come." And for the first time since Grandpa's funeral, I realized that his story wasn't over yet. I barely slept that night. The sealed envelope stayed on my kitchen table, and every time I walked past it, I thought about opening it. Grandpa's handwriting was unmistakable. I had seen those careful letters on birthday cards, grocery lists, and little notes he tucked into Maya's lunchbox when she was a little girl. But I remembered his instruction. "Do not open. Give this to Attorney Harrison if my will is ever questioned." Grandpa had trusted me all my life. I wasn't about to break that trust now. The next morning, I placed the envelope inside my purse and drove to Mr. Harrison's office. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I had no idea what was inside, but something deep inside my heart told me Grandpa had been trying to protect me. Mr. Harrison was waiting at the front door. The moment he saw the envelope, his expression changed. "Thank you for bringing it," he said quietly. He led me into the conference room where we had gathered just 2 days earlier. This time, there were no smiles, only silence. He examined Grandpa's signature on the back of the envelope before carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small flash drive. Mr. Harrison looked at me. "I think your grandfather wanted us to read this together." I nodded. He unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. "My dear Naomi, if you are hearing these words, something has gone wrong. I pray I am mistaken, but I have lived long enough to recognize greed when I see it." Tears filled my eyes. It felt as though Grandpa was sitting beside me. Mr. Harrison continued. "I love both of my grandchildren, but during my final months, I noticed documents disappearing from my office. I noticed signatures placed before me without enough time to read them. I also noticed that Marcus became far more interested in my money than in my health." My heart sank. I remembered how often Marcus insisted on handling Grandpa's paperwork. I never wanted to believe my own grandson could betray my trust, the letter continued. So I asked Attorney Harrison to prepare a second file. I also asked him to keep certain records private until the proper time. Mr. Harrison stopped reading for a moment. There is more. He inserted the flash drive into his computer. A security video appeared on the screen. The date was 6 months before Grandpa passed away. The camera overlooked Grandpa's office at Carter Woodworks. Marcus walked into the room after closing time. He opened Grandpa's filing cabinet, removed several documents, and photographed them with his phone. A few minutes later, he placed different papers back into the folder. I covered my mouth. I can't believe this. Mr. Harrison sighed. Your grandfather installed this camera after he suspected someone was entering his office. He continued reading the letter. If this recording is ever needed, it means my fears were justified. I refuse to accuse Marcus without proof because he is still my grandson. But neither could I allow dishonesty to become my final family legacy. I wiped tears from my face. Grandpa had known. He had quietly searched for the truth instead of reacting in anger. The letter continued. Yomi, I know you never cared about my money. That is exactly why you deserve my trust. Character is worth more than property. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Mr. Harrison opened a locked drawer in his desk. Inside was another sealed legal folder. I couldn't release this unless the conditions described in your grandfather's letter were met, he explained. He handed me the document. This is your grandfather's final estate plan. I stared at him in disbelief. There was. Another will? He nodded. Yes. The first will was intentionally left where Marcus would find it. Your grandfather believed someone might try to manipulate his estate. He wanted the truth to reveal itself before the real documents were presented. I could hardly breathe. Mr. Harrison opened the second will. It was dated just 3 weeks before Grandpa's passing. Everything was different. Grandpa had divided his estate fairly. The family home would belong to me. Marcus would receive a generous financial inheritance, but not control of the business. Carter Woodworks would become jointly owned by Maya and me, with instructions that it should continue serving the community exactly as Grandpa had intended. At the bottom of the page was Grandpa's final handwritten sentence. Love without honesty cannot survive, but truth, even when painful, gives a family one last chance to heal. Just then, someone pounded loudly on the office door. Mr. Harrison looked toward the hallway. His assistant hurried inside. Marcus Carter is here, she whispered nervously. He says he knows Naomi is inside, and he's demanding to see both of you. Mr. Harrison calmly closed the folder. He looked at me and gave a reassuring smile. I think, he said quietly, it's finally time for your brother to hear what your grandfather really wanted. Outside the conference room, Marcus's footsteps echoed through the hallway, for the first time since Grandpa died. He no longer sounded like a man who had already won. The conference room door opened before anyone could say another word. Marcus walked in with the same confidence he had worn during the first reading of Grandpa's will. But the moment he saw the second folder lying on the table, his smile began to fade. He looked from me to Mr. Harrison. What's going on? He asked. Mr. Harrison remained calm. Please have a seat, Marcus. I'd rather stand. As you wish. The lawyer folded his hands. Your grandfather anticipated that questions might arise regarding his estate. Because of that, he left additional instructions that were to remain sealed unless certain circumstances occurred. Marcus frowned. What additional instructions? Without answering, Mr. Harrison turned the computer monitor toward him and pressed play. The security video began. Marcus watched himself entering Grandpa's office. He watched himself opening the filing cabinet. He watched himself removing documents and replacing them with different papers. The color drained from his face. That's not what it looks like, he stammered. Mr. Harrison paused the video. Then perhaps you would like to explain what we are seeing. Marcus lowered his eyes. No words came. The silence felt heavier than any argument ever could. Then Mr. Harrison picked up Grandpa's handwritten letter. He read the final paragraphs aloud. Marcus, if you are listening to this, know that I have loved you every day of your life. My greatest sadness is not that you wanted my money. My greatest sadness is that you believed you needed to deceive your own family to have it. Tears filled my eyes. Grandpa wasn't trying to punish him. Even now, he was speaking with love. The lawyer continued. Real wealth is not measured by the size of a bank account. It is measured by the trust people place in your name. If you lose that trust, no amount of money can replace it. Marcus slowly sat down. For the first time in years, I saw my younger brother instead of the confident businessman he pretended to be. His shoulders trembled. I never meant, he whispered before stopping. Mr. Harrison opened the second will. This is Mr. Isaiah Carter's legally valid final estate plan. He carefully explained every page. The family home would belong to me. Carter Woodworks would remain in the Carter family under my care and Maya's future leadership. Marcus would still receive a generous financial inheritance, enough to begin again honestly, but he would not control the business or sell Grandpa's home. Everything had been arranged with fairness. Everything reflected the values Grandpa had lived by. Marcus buried his face in his hands. I ruined everything, he said quietly. I looked at my brother for a long moment. Part of me remembered every lie. Every broken promise, every painful moment over the past few weeks, but another part remembered 2 children riding bicycles together down our neighborhood street. I remembered building blanket forts in Grandpa's living room. I remembered Marcus holding my hand at our mother's funeral because we were both too scared to stand alone. People can lose themselves. That didn't erase the hurt, but it reminded me that hurt people sometimes make terrible choices. I walked across the room until I stood beside him. He slowly looked up. I'm not fighting you anymore, Marcus, I said softly. His eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not today. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. But Grandpa spent his whole life believing broken things could be repaired. He began crying quietly. I'm sorry, Naomi. I know. Those 2 words were enough. Healing doesn't always begin with a perfect apology. Sometimes it begins with an honest one. 6 months later, Carter Woodworks was busy again. The old workshop sounded exactly the way Grandpa loved it, saws humming, hammers tapping, and customers laughing as they picked up restored furniture. Maya had become an incredible manager. She introduced new ideas while protecting every tradition Grandpa had taught us. The wooden sign above the entrance still read Carter Woodworks, but beneath it, we added one simple sentence that Grandpa often repeated. See what something can become. Marcus kept his inheritance. Instead of chasing another risky business, he paid his debts, found steady work, and slowly rebuilt his life. Our relationship wasn't perfect. Trust takes time to grow back, but little by little, we started sharing Sunday dinners again. Sometimes healing happens quietly. One evening, I sat alone on Grandpa's porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The old porch swing creaked gently beneath me. I smiled as I remembered his words. Money should build a future, not pride. Now I finally understood what he meant. Grandpa's greatest inheritance had never been the house. It wasn't the land. It wasn't even Carter Woodworks. His greatest inheritance was integrity. And that was the one thing my brother almost lost forever. If there's one lesson my family's story taught me, it's this. People may steal money, property, or possessions for a while, but truth has a way of finding its voice. And when it finally speaks, It doesn't just reveal who was wrong, it reminds us who we still have the chance to become. That, more than anything Grandpa ever left behind, became the legacy that truly changed our family forever.